Well, welcome to this video, which is a reenactment of a service I gave last Sunday to a Universalist Unitarian Fellowship in Grants Pass, Oregon. The title is An Atheist Embalmer Prays for the Pope, and today is 31st of May, 2019. I gladly welcome Pope Francis to view this in case it actually does come to your eyes, this video of a prayer for you. And although I wish to speak directly to Pope Francis, I know others may tune into this if only for a provocative title, and so if that is the case, welcome. What follows is this reenactment of a sermon I presented last Sunday when the camera didn't work there, so I'll redo it now. My message for him, after all, is intended for all, so anyone who views this, I welcome you again. And though the title may seem gimmicky, the intent is quite sincere. Now, please be advised that all sermons by Unitarian Universalists are unique events. UU ministers are afforded the latitude to think for themselves and then to say so. The Pope and many viewers may be unfamiliar with this small liberal denomination which was born of Christian origins and has since incorporated Enlightenment and humanistic values. While I have critiqued Christian and other faith traditions in other places, here I want to be appreciative of the Pope and what he had to say. I'll explain what I mean by atheist and embalmer, and then I'll share what the Pope published, why I like it, and end up praying for him. Well, loosely, an atheist is someone who doesn't believe in someone else's God. Socrates was called an atheist for not worshiping the Roman gods. Democritus, Lucretius, Thomas Paine, Marlene Dietrich, Carl Sagan, Noam Chomsky, these are all called atheists, so I'll place myself in good company. But my atheism is a muddled sort. I pray, though I don't believe any God listens. I marvel at creation, and I know we humans didn't make it, but I don't double the mystery by claiming to know who did make it. I'm not anti-religion or anti-God. I'm just at the further extreme from the Pope. If you have a Protestant spectrum, the Episcopalian Church is closer to Catholicism, and then over on the left would be Unity and the United Church of Christ, and then farther left than that would be the Unitarian Universalists. Very individualistic, humanistic, mostly non-dogmatic. And even then, I'm a bit liberal for it, I think. We welcome all, from atheists to mystics. So I'm as secular as you, Pope Francis, are sectarian, and yet I agree with you on many things. And a lot of secular and sectarian people do agree. I was raised by my mother, who had turned Catholic when she and her sister Mary were converted by nuns when they were young girls in the Detroit area. And because Aunt Mary was so self-assured, we called her the Pope. And because Mom was so constantly kind, we called her a saint. And though I was baptized Catholic as an infant, and I participated in many masses, attended parochial schools in the 2nd and 3rd grade, and then later in the 7th and 8th grade, I left the Catholic fold when I was only 14 years old. I went to the friendlier priest at Our Lady of the Lakes Parish and asked for confession. But instead of going to a confession booth, I told him face to face of my sin and my resolve. My sin was to keep coming to church when I no longer believed in it. And my resolve was to not return, and I didn't. As the eldest of 5, this was very disruptive in my family. Some considered me an atheist. I was merely living up to what I felt was right to do. Well, then years later, while I was finishing high school, I got a job at a funeral home, doing their yard and setting up chairs and parking cars. And then I was helping to pick up dead bodies from cold morgues. And then I learned how to embalm them and went to mortuary school after 2 years of college. Because our hearse doubled as the community's ambulance, we would put a bubble on the top and have a cart to take people on. In it, I also encountered the stark reality of our precious and precarious bodies. From transporting those who had died, to mending those who were hurt, to catching a slippery newborn baby when I was 18. And without going into the yuckier realities of ambulance work or embalming, suffice it to say, I came to appreciate the wonder and the worth of our precious bodies. And in college, though I had avoided science in high school, I came to discover and value the orderly and reliable understanding of the physical universe as made known by science. Physics and chemistry and biology and microbiology all made sense of a real world, and it helped me to later understand and appreciate the growing realm of environmental science. Philosophically, I believe our bodies and our world are what the theologian Carl Tillich once called the ground of our being. Though to me, the ground of our being is our ground, is our earth, is our bodies. Well, like in college, I went on to get a bachelor's degree in psychology and in philosophy, learning from everyone from B.F. Skinner to Carl Jung, everyone from Aristotle to Lao Tzu. I also found a church I liked. The Unitarian Universalist traditions, while born of Christianity, had grown wider, incorporating humanistic expectations. I found that those without a faith in God are also very good people. And I went from funeral directing and embalming into the liberal ministry. I went to a graduate school, a liberal seminary, which was then located at the University of Chicago, very fortunate for me, learning not only of the Unitarian Universalist tradition, but of others, and saw in comparative religion the world's wide variety of beliefs and practices. I was also enamored then of the counterculture of the late 60s. Everything from really good rock and roll to psychedelics and resistance to the war enthused me. Now, although my Unitarian Universalism is the furthest outlier in the Protestant spectrum, affirming individual liberty and connection and eschewing dogmatic stances, we happen to embody in our principles the very points that you make in your papal letter. For instance, the inherent worth and dignity of everyone, justice, equity, and compassion in our relations, a goal of world community, and respect for the interdependent web of all existence. And though we are distinct on some theological points, on these things we agree. Now, as an aside, although I am more educated than many and most Americans, I make far less money than most Americans too. And although I do live near the poverty level in my society, I know that I'm a wealthy man on a worldwide basis. And I thank God for my wealth. I have shelter, I have water, I have food, I have security, I have transportation, I have health, entertainment, friendship, culture, community, pleasures aplenty. Poorer people like me live like kings did only just a few generations ago. And the gratitude I have for this abundance doesn't get lost in a greed for ever more, as so many get tricked into in the human community. And while I did not pay much attention to the Catholic world until you came along, Pope Francis, for the first time in many decades, I found myself admiring the things a pope said. I'm a liberal person. I like the word liberal. I think it's a good word. So hearing that you are a liberal pope increased your stature for me. You've reached respectfully out to the Eastern Orthodox, the Lutherans, the Mormons, all towards mutual understanding. That's good. And I understand that you see God as redeeming all of us, even atheists, when we stay true to our conscience. This fits with our universalism, for we are all worthy and we are all loved. I'm not gay, but I like gay people, and I hate to see them marginalized. And when I heard you say regarding gays, "Who am I to judge?" I perked up. Most popes and religious types do exactly that, judge. And they judge condescendingly and punitively. What a reassuring relief to see a pope who is humane instead of haughty. Researching this talk, I also discovered that you like to dance the tango, and you were once a bouncer at a nightclub, and you even owned a Harley. And I found reference to your having been married and having a child, but were then widowed before you entered the priesthood in Argentina. And checking on that proved elusive. Anyway, nothing impressed me more than your 2015 papal letter on our common home, dwelling especially on the accumulating harm that's done to the world's poor and our environment. Now, many religious leaders get or keep support from the world's political leaders by protecting them, leading their flocks to tend to their beliefs or an afterlife instead of fixing and fulfilling this earthly life. You rightly and boldly stand up to the formidable political and economic powers of our world. Your long, lovely letter, Laudito Si, on care for our common home, loves this common home that we all must share. Your blessing is on the splendid beauty and worth of natural creation, with all its interrelated life, and on the poorer humans who seek their dignity and their freedom within the natural world. Your laudito, your praise, is on the poor and life as interrelated expressions of God itself. Now, I have often and long lamented on how little gratitude there is in the attitude of most religions of the world, Western and Eastern, towards our physical bodies and the natural living cosmos that we must live in and share. Both get regarded as merely temporary, a stage for going on to new lives in other realms. It irks me to see them regarded as if irrelevant, as if spirituality is better or beyond them. It pleased and impressed me to see you reach out on behalf of the poor bodies and the injured environment with godly concern and with practical hope. Back in the 60s, the Doors asked, "What have you done with the earth? What have you done to our fair sister? Ravaged and plundered and ripped her and bit her and stuck her with knives in the side of the dawn and tied her with fences and dragged her down." Well, you revived this dire question. The extraction unto exhaustion of resources, the tossing of trash, the spreading of toxins, the abandonment of the growing poor, depleted of their strength and spirit, the waste and mayhem of war, all of these you call sin. Good word. We have come to see ourselves as her lords and masters entitled to plunder her at will, you wrote. But the outer and the inner worlds are interconnected. You also wrote, violence in us, wounded by sin, reflects in the sickness of the soil, water, air, and life. And much of that gets rationalized as if condoned in Genesis 1, my favorite scripture passage, the 6 stages of evolutionary creation, where we humans, males and females, are not only created but called good and then given dominion. But dominion assumed by many who use that passage is that of a greedy, callous king, and not the sovereignty, which I think may be a better word for that, of freeborn, smart, caring humans who steward this good and getting better creation. Further, those who claim an arrogant dominion often forget the other half of the instruction in that short passage, to replenish the earth. We take a lot from the oceans. Just how do we replenish them? Well, I read your long letter in close detail and paraphrased it to make sure that I got your intent. So I made a shorter kind of Cliff Notes version of your longer letter. If people would like to read that, they can go to my website, www.earthlyreligion.com, and see my shortening of your longer papal letter. I've also researched reactions to your letter, learning of the ominous efforts to bring you down. The same sort of people who caused your father to flee Italy back when are now after you. Mussolini was the devil of that day. We've got new Mussolinis on the rise these days. A smug, haughty, jutting jaw impresses some, but it creeps me out, and others too. Arrogant autocrats committing blatant murders of journalists and of the poor are all the red tie rage these days. Fear and hate feed their populist bases. The actual murders of thousands in the Philippines gets bragged about by their president. There's no external court or power to restrain such people. And the media, which would and should expose them, has been co-opted to lie for them, or it gets dismissed and shunted aside as if fake news. Well, this familiar formula of stealthily steering the media to rouse up all sorts of wild fears, stirring up resentment and anger, has been inflicted quite skillfully in many more places than here in our 2016 election. Our current president was ushered into office with Russian help, no doubt, but also by his friend Steve Bannon. Bannon helped found Cambridge Analytica, a firm which deciphered social media trends and then targeted ads and wild riling posts on social media. Well, Steve Bannon went on to easily sway Britain away from the EU with Brexit, to rouse up right-wing populist angers in Europe, advise the Bolsonaro family in Brazil, and then buy an old monastery near Rome to hound you. His Dignitatis Humanae Institute is founded by right-wingers, some of whom want the former pope back, not you. Bannon will likely pick the volatile sex abuse scandal and add in homophobic fears to bark and bite at you, because unease over sex issues takes attention away from the poor and our environment. But probably behind him and that is or are the transnational corporations that want to go on creating global warming and wage slavery, irrespective of the ethics involved. And even as I was writing this, the UN panel of scientists warns that we humans are creating the sixth extinction event, tens to hundreds of times faster than any natural extinction event other than when the comet hit us. Our natural ecosystems are down by a half, and a fourth of all plant and animal species are threatened with extinction. And not just the big animals that we know and like, but the little crucial ones, like the pollinator insects and the bees. And yet, the same week as that report came out, my country's Secretary of State announced with glee how profitable it will be. Primarily, he didn't admit to the industrialists of America, Canada, and Russia, to go and take the oil, gas, gold, and diamonds of the formerly frozen Arctic. At the same time, Our president's key advisors proudly pound the drums of war against two distant states, Iran and Venezuela, both coincidentally weaker and oil producers. Now we know that the burning of coal, oil, and natural gas is creating havoc worldwide and will continue that havoc for hundreds of years. And yet these companies are inured of any criticism and uninterested in doing it differently. Instead of some practical Green New Deal that would create not only a lot of jobs, but the ongoing free, clean, renewable energy that we're otherwise burning with pollution to have, we get the same old bad deal of tragic wars waged to keep the waste going. Such a tragedy. Old money rules. So yours, Pope Francis, is a bright light in a dark time. Yet many won't see it. They're distracted by the glitz of cheap consumerism. They're roused to racism. They're riled by nationalism. And yet again, others, such as I, and perhaps people viewing this, do appreciate your efforts. You've given rationales of care, not just for Catholics, but for all. You grounded your papal letter in your tradition, drawing on other recent popes and ancient scriptures, but you put it very bluntly and effectively, I think. Your tenderness and prophetic passion arise from the Christ you serve. It's odd how in the Christian world, both historically and even currently to some extent, how the Christian world has often wandered into imitating the lackey judges who condemned Jesus, or even the soldiers who drove the spikes, instead of being like the kind and inclusive person that Jesus was. Belief has come to substitute for behavior. Your prayers at the end of your letter say it well. Quote, "Bring healing to our lives that we may protect the world and not prey on it, and that we may sow beauty, not pollution and destruction." And then you went on, "Enlighten those who possess power and money, that they may avoid the sin of indifference, that they may love the common good, and advance the weak, and care for the world in which we live." End of your quote of your prayer. The only slight difference I have with your letter is, to me, it looks like a false dichotomy between those of faith and those secular workers in the scientific and technocratic realms especially. In fact, I think hope and help resides exactly there. As Peter Diamandis revealed recently at a Vatican conference on the extended lifespan, just 700 years ago, the plague killed 200 million. And a mere 100 years ago, influenza killed 16 million. Fixing such diseases and advancing our human abilities has progressed exponentially, as Diamandis likes to show. Not only in computers and communications, though, but also in transport, housing, energy, diet, health. We humans could not only live longer, but much better. And such practical advances mostly come from secular scientists and entrepreneurs pursuing their particular massively transformative purpose, such as Mr. Elon Musk has done with his wizardry electric cars. They may not go to Mass, but they care about humanity and Earth's life as much as you do. So just as John Dewey once advised we in his book called A Common Faith, that we honor ordinary workers and help buoy the inner goodness of anyone who tends the poor and the earth. And while we must fix the huge economic and technological problems besetting our civilization and planet, we need also the profound but possible vision of a whole, healed, healthy, happy world. Humanity needs better visions and better leaders. So thank you, Pope Francis. Your letter helps launch such possible visions. May we all help, religious and secular alike, in this dangerously fallen era when utter scoundrels rile and rule. You have skillfully used your position to bring us to our common home. We need not be in the last days of an apocalyptic tragedy. We could be at the dawn of a rescue and a revival of Eden and our flourishing along in it. The future could last longer and be better than anything we've been assuming, better than ever, were we to have the will to have it. Your inspired and brave leadership help us to live into that. So thank you, Pope Francis. And now I know it's strange to record a prayer to a video, but I'd like to say this for you, Pope Francis. Dear God, you who I doubt and yet call upon, hear my sincere prayer for our Pope, even as the good souls here watching this might also similarly pray. Jorge Mario Bergoglio is a good man. Like Jesus, he cares for the ignored, forgotten, and abused of our world. He loves the manifold forms of life on earth and cares to see them exalted rather than exhausted. He confronts the powerful, calling on them to veer our economy and our technologies to serve and fulfill all humanity and all Earth's life. He unites his theological tradition with a practical vision of a single humanity sharing a common, precarious, and so precious home. Awaken praise and faith for our simple, elegant ruler. Let his intent and words touch the hearts of those who can help, from peasants to presidents. Protect this vulnerable man, Lord. Keep him safe from those who would undermine his purpose or attack his person. And help us all, Lord, believers and non-believers alike, to awaken to the glory of our incarnation, giving back this gift we are given to the culture and the ecosystem that birthed and supports us. May our gratitude grow into ingenuity, making our common home better than we've ever envisioned. Bless our Pope with a long life, fulfilling the higher purpose that he takes from you. We each in our own way pray this for him and for each other, and especially for our common home. Amen.